Hello and welcome to Chicago Reacts. My name is Lauren, and today I am watching a FilmSpeak video. When the director effing hates Hollywood. It's about The Substance. So Jess and I recently watched The Substance. Full video is over on Patreon. Don't know when it's going to go up on YouTube because I'm still really shook from that movie. Oh man, it got me really, really, really bad. Yeah. So that's been living in my brain and I can't get it out of my brain and it's terrifying. It messed me. That movie was messed. So anyway, I don't know when I'm going to sit there and edit it. Because at this point I'm like, I never want to see this again. It was a good movie. If you have a weak stomach, don't watch it. I would say, like, yeah, it's a lot, that movie. It's a lot, Robin. But anyway, this is going to be just a little bit about it. I'm curious. I don't know what this video is going to be about, but Kit recommended that I watch this video. Kit also recommended that I watch The Substance, so thank you, Kit. He's the reason that it just like certain scenes of it just play over and over in my head when I'm trying to sleep. So anyway, I shall not forgive you, Kit. But this is going to be fine. This is fine. We're watching a FilmSpeak video. Let's go.
What does a theatrical hit look like in the modern film landscape? Gone are the days of the mid-budget studio film that dominated the 90s and early 2000s. In a pre-streaming Hollywood, there was a more adventurous moviegoer who would head to their local multiplex, look up at a light, bright litany of titles that sounded vaguely familiar from the newspaper or an episode of Siskel and Ebert at the movies, and they'd take a shot with little more than a gut instinct. In this culture of widespread and frequent moviegoing, there was ample opportunity to see a range of stuff. Sure, maybe everyone at work is talking about this movie where a kid sees dead people ushered around by Bruce Willis. I mean, I don't know, and you want to be in on that conversation. But maybe you also see Dark City on a whim because you're curious about this dreary noir seemingly indebted to Fritz Lang, and you're surrounded by people with a similar curiosity who leave the theater thinking, yeah, that was kind of weird, but I'm glad I experienced it.
Honestly, there are several movies that I've seen because I've known the title and nothing else. Like, The Substance was one of them. But also Poor Things, Civil War. There's been a couple of them that I've seen and I've literally known nothing but the title. I do remember The Substance specifically. The first time I saw a trailer for it, because we did technically see a trailer for it. I don't remember what movie we were in the theater to watch, but like we saw a trailer for it, but we just spent the whole time making fun of the name The Substance and did not pay attention to the trailer. So I didn't know what was, I didn't know.
Fast forward to 2024, and the world has changed. Now, don't get me wrong, there are great titles released every year bolstered by newer studios like A24 or Neon, willing to take idiosyncratic swings on auteur filmmakers whose work exists outside of readily identifiable audience appetites. But even the more visible titles
the length of time it took me to figure out that was, I was like, what's with the weird? Did not recognize it at all. They didn't look good.
Auteur filmmakers whose work
like the little they're the Navi or whatever, right? Avatar. I was like, this just looks, that looked bad to me. It just doesn't, okay. The CGI doesn't look great.
Identifiable audience appetites. But even the more visible titles like Hereditary, X, Titan command a minuscule fraction of the box office films like that used to, with major studios behind them. The thing is that audiences have grown to expect that these films will be available from one of their many streaming subscriptions in a few months, which minimizes a lot of the urgency once felt to see a film during its theatrical window, lest you experience the FOMO of not knowing what the f happens in The Sixth Sense sense beyond what your loudest coworker has repeated in detail in the break room. These days, for a movie to be a probable hit from a studio standpoint, with, a few exceptions, we're talking comic book properties, reboots of pre-existing
Which is
franchises,
such a
and
bummer.
YA novels with a feral readership eager to see their favorite Instagram influencer build in the third position. Sure, horror also performs well, but the larger budget titles tend to be tied to existing franchises or box office tested filmmakers, and the weirder stuff follows a risk-averse investment, often in the sub $5 million range. But what happens when a film that, by all dependable studio metrics, should repel and frighten the sensibilities of the average moviegoer, but overperforms and becomes a certifiable box office hit? How do we make sense of that?
Well, because I feel like we're exhausted. I'm gonna guess we're exhausted by just the because you hear everyone complains about it too. Everything's the same. It all looks the same. Like you could put like 3 different stills from 3 different movies and you would not be able to tell which one was which because they all look identical. It's obnoxious, but like this was something different. So it's like when something different like that shows up, people are interested. So like this movie I still find very funny because like Universal was supposed to distribute it and they were like, oh, I don't know. No, we're not going to do it. So they pulled out, and then Mubi of all things. Mubi. It's like, we'll distribute it. It's like, all right, put yourselves on the map, I guess.
The Substance had lived a very strange life before it saw its first festival audience. The film was originally financed for a reported $17.5 million by Universal, coming off of filmmaker Coralie Farjat's film Revenge, a conventional rape revenge thriller on its surface that was electrified by its extreme violence and female POV that inverted the traditional gaze in favor of something more volatile and contemporary.
Never heard of this
However,
one, but cool.
Whatever excitement the studio had about backing her aggressive body horror follow-up faded almost immediately when executives saw the film in post. One can only speculate on the conversation that transpired, but it's not hard to imagine a studio executive fearful of losing their job watching the film that I saw and not freaking the fuck out. It's a film about an aging star whose cultural prescribed value is in decline, causing her to take part in an experimental trial that violently births a younger, more beautiful version of herself from a spine-long gash in her back. From
It's
there,
very
the balance
gross.
between the older and younger versions of herself falls out of phase, causing her body to rot exponentially as her hatred of the younger self grows.
It's because the younger self is a bitch. That is just the act. That's the facts. That's just the facts. The younger self is just a huge bitch, and she keeps stealing years and from the older self. But no, having watched, like I said, I watched this movie. I don't want to watch it again. So I guess in this particular place, I can understand the studio being like, what? There's at least one part when Jess and I were watching this movie that we both went to gag in opposite directions. Like, oh my God. Ew. I almost threw up all over your floor. I also almost threw up.
Is an insane idea for a movie, and I'm not sure what about The Substance made sense to the studio at a script stage, though
I don't know
after
either.
Farjat delivered the film, but a shift in either studio leadership of the film marketplace caused the studio to panic and screen the film they deemed unreleasable to other potential buyers. This wasn't going straight to Peacock. They needed to get rid of it. Enter Mubi, an independent streaming service that has recently entered the production and distribution landscape. They tend to license pre-existing titles for their curated streaming service, but they occasionally buy smaller films at market as Mubi exclusives. But nothing like The Substance.
This is
partly because
there is nothing.
aren't any recent titles like The Substance, and what may have seemed like a huge risk for the small company, particularly given Universal's utter lack of faith in the finished product, has turned out to be Mubi's greatest success to date. The thing Mubi saw that Universal fundamentally failed to see is a general audience willing to engage with the grotesque when it speaks to something primal and universally relatable, the fraught relationship with the self under the hyperbolic pressures of capitalism.
And I feel like a lot of women relate to this movie too. It's like one of the things about this movie is that the way that she is treated like a commodity the entire time, both as Quali and as Moore. Both women are treated purely as basically a piece of meat. And there's a couple of like very on the nose aspects of that, but then like you get to the part at the end where she's just this grotesque monster with like a mask of like her face on it, and like no one even notices until like it's like they're looking right at this beast and they don't notice because she's not important, like because it doesn't matter, she is not important. Like, you never even find out what Elizabeth's real name is. Like, I don't know. It's interesting. And it's honestly, like I said, this movie has definitely changed me. I am changed as a person having seen this movie. And honestly, I feel a little better about myself. And I've seen that like in a lot of people are commenting about that too. I've seen a bunch of women all being like, this movie really does talk about how like self-image has been warped. Like our self-image has been warped as like a society, as a culture. And like this movie kind of takes you by the shoulder, shakes you, and is like, hey, you have worth. Wherever you are in life, you have worth. However old you are, don't listen to these gross people telling you that you don't. Dennis Quaid's character is disgusting in this movie. Oh my God. Like we thought that the Denethor eating the cherry was bad. You've seen some of the stuff. And honestly, I hope if you're watching this, you've seen the movie. Like there's spoilers. I'm spoiling everything. Anyway, but I think that's why I think that this movie does really, really resonate with a lot of people, and a lot of us see ourselves in the characters in this movie. And like we do feel like the monster she turns into at the end, and then it's like, oh, maybe it wasn't so bad before. I don't know.
And you'll have to pardon the cute wordplay here, but I can't think of the last time a box office gross like this has followed a film so gross.
It is gross. It is gross.
Of Terrifier 3, but there's a precedent for a violent slasher franchise successfully capitalizing on an existing genre audience. This is a film about women driven to horrifying and visceral madness by the absurdity of modern beauty standards. That's fucking insane.
Yeah.
This is arguably the only film this decade outside of Barbarian to genuinely deliver on its alleged shock factor. Coralie Farjaw's unrelentingly demented satire on female self-hatred perpetuated by the objectifying gaze of a chauvinist patriarchy is brutally weaponized.
He said it much better than I did.
Ageist, unrealistic beauty standards are twisted, tangled, and pulled together, revealing a monster of our own creation. And if you take a step back, you can start to see why this film might resonate for an audience that wouldn't typically turn out for a film wherein bodily orifices ooze and birth globs of only vaguely recognizable bodily material. It is frankly disgusting, but it's also pretty fucking awesome. And there is ultimately catharsis in the idea that the lengths we go to, the products we buy, the operations we push ourselves into debt to pursue, all for the absurd goal of preserving our youth and freezing the present moment, are just that. Absurd. If you push yourself to achieve this impossibility, you will not only be despondent in your failure, but you'll also lose out on the joy of the present. This core humanity, I will argue, is why The Substance has become such a cultural phenomenon genuinely lives up to and even surpasses the hype it received by critics coming out of its initial premiere. I think this movie is an instant classic and a compelling case for the commercial viability of body horror in the modern era. Bodies. We all have them. And
Ugh.
maybe that sucks, but there's no way around it, and any attempts to circumvent this reality will result in, well, we'll get there soon enough. But first,
good.
this video is brought to you by our Discord server. Yes, this is going to be a quick plug to join our Discord, the FilmSpeak Discord. We're having a lot of great conversations in there regarding film, television, Q&As about the production of these videos or anything you really want to talk about. I give feedback on thumbnails if you're working on that. I do little teases for some of the upcoming videos, and we're just building a fantastic community there of fellow film lovers, and yeah, hope to see you in there. All of the substances ideas are elegantly embodied by its protagonist, Elizabeth Sparkle, played by an incredible Demi Moore.
She
arguably her greatest
earned
performance
her
ever, as the
freaking
substance
Golden
opens
Globe for
following
this,
a
for
very
sure.
funny bookend shot of a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame as it endures footsteps, seasons, and the splatter of street food. We see that Elizabeth is aging quite gracefully from
Yeah, she
a
looks
list
great.
star into the host of a fitness program that preaches being the best version of yourself. To a layperson, it seems like an ideal existence for a one-time star. This, however, quickly fades when Elizabeth is forced to use the stall in a men's room, when the producer of the show, played by Dennis Quaid, enters the bathroom, stares right into a fisheye lens, emphasizing his very clogged pores to nauseating effect, and begins to spew a misogynistic tirade into his phone.
As he
laughs
pees.
maniacally
As he
explains
pisses.
that Sparkle is too old, and they need to find a
And then he
hot
doesn't wash
young
his hands.
star to replace her. The visual dialectic contrasting this conversation with the way the camera photographs Quaid in intentionally disgusting close-up gives you the film's POV right out of the gate. There is a double standard and an impossible contrast between the patriarchal expectations of the world and the realities of the human body. She hosts a show about being the best version of yourself, but the producer of the show says that no woman aged 50 can be their best version. At this
18
point,
to 30.
I couldn't be in there either.
of
I'm an old
circumstances
lady.
lead her to procuring the substance, an experimental intravenous drug that will birth a younger, more beautiful version of the self, but one that comes with a few caveats. Firstly, your body essentially explodes to release the second body. Secondly, when one body is in control, the other lies vacant in a catatonic state for, and this is important, no more than 7 days before the self must be transferred between bodies in order to regenerate the preserving fluid. If
Except for, okay, so for me, oh, this is a great
one
place to
body
stop.
remains
For me, though,
in
I'm,
control
okay.
for even minutes longer than allocated, the other body
Okay, so yeah, it changes. So for me, I was like, but I don't think they don't really remember what the other person is getting up to, though. Like I think, like at least that's the way that we kind of interpret it. It seems like they have like vague flashes or like what the other person is doing. It kind of comes up in dream states, basically, but it's not like they don't. The consciousness. It doesn't feel like the consciousness is fully transferred. That once they've split the first time, they feel more like two different people. They're supposed to be. They're not two different people. It's just the same. It's the same person. But like, it feels to me, at least it felt to me and Jess that like they don't really remember exactly what the other person is getting up to. They both seemed surprised when they wake up in the morning and like the place is trashed in different ways. I don't know. So let me know what y'all think.
begins to rot, thus initiating a push and pull between the vigor and opportunity of youth and the desperate desire for self-preservation that comes with age. This is essentially everything you need to know about the plot of the film, because the substance is less a vehicle for story than a horrific and hilarious Rube Goldberg contraption dripping with viscera and unidentifiable bodily fluids. This desire
Spinal
to
fluid,
keep the plot
mostly.
light in
And
favor
blood.
of character and theme is a big part of why the substance works as well as it does. To distract an audience with undue story would give them the opportunity to live in a more analytical headspace, which is not where Farja wants you to be. She wants you to be in your body, feeling the push and pull, the nausea,
It's
the
so gross.
symphony.
I can't
of
believe that
internal
was
feeling
allowed.
The film intends to evoke.
That shot.
Now, before I go any further, I want to be very clear on this so that I'm not misunderstood. While I think there is something universal in the substance, in the self-loathing and fraught internal conflict that comes with aging out of the most youthful self, it is important to state that this movie explores that idea within the explicit framework of womanhood. I'm not minimizing the experiences of my fellow men, but the pressures that women face in Western society, particularly as it relates to age and beauty standards, is completely insane if you take even a half step back. There are entire industries built on expensive cosmetics, clothes, pharmaceuticals, elective surgery, all sustained by preserving unrealistic standards of beauty.
Yeah. One day I'll learn how to do my makeup. I can sort of do some eye makeup. That's all I got. I'm not good at it. I should get better, probably. I should probably get better at doing some makeup. But it's like, I mean, even just little things like when Alec and I do a reaction, you know, he just shows up and whatever. And I feel like I have to like get really gussied up and like look nice. And maybe that's unrealistic. Maybe no one else cares, but like, I don't know. I've had comments, it's been a long time, but like I've had comments that like talk about my man hands. Like, and my like a receding hairline, and I don't know. Like I've had comments that are like, I'm like, okay, well then I'll get bangs. You know? Granted, my hairline isn't receding at all. Like even when it's all the way back, it's like my hand is on my hair, so it's fine. But the point is, gentlemen, there are certain standards of beauty that I feel like I have to uphold. And again, maybe that's mostly in my head. I don't know. But it's still there. Like that feeling is still there. And again, like something like this does make me feel a little better, and like it makes me want to push back on that a little bit more and think, well, you know what, actually maybe it's fine. Maybe it's fine. Maybe I don't have to learn how to contour. I mean, I certainly don't plan on getting like Botox ever or fillers or anything like that, but even before I learned what that was going to do to you, I didn't want that. Anyway, irrelevant. Let's go.
We know this. It's nothing new. It's been around for years, and because these cultural values have become so normalized, it's hard to make an impactful statement in cinematic form by just demonstrating that with normal, recognizable bodies. The substance uses its body horror and its hyperbolic contrasts between beauty and grotesquerie to give physical shape to the way we feel inside. Sue's body is adjusted with a combination of CG and doubling to the point where it's almost entirely desexualized and rendered uncanny. Sure, you're seeing a naked woman on screen, but Farjah's POV as a woman, in the very specific cinematography and VFX choices she makes, refuse the conventional desire of the male gaze and show the audience how absurd it is to interpolate a viewer in this leering perspective. Instead, there's something almost alien about the way she depicts beauty that feels like a visual representation of the envy a person feels inside thinking of a more beautiful person than themselves. In contrast, the film's ugliness is pretty hard to locate in Demi Moore, who is an ageless icon of Hollywood, which is why the substance transforms her body into something utterly grotesque. This
yes, it does.
Of practical effects is a fucking horrifying mass of skin, heads, teeth, orifice, and drips the nastiest goo you've ever seen.
It's bad.
Every opening. In the
it's
same
bad.
Way that Sue's is not a recognizable beauty, this is not a recognizable ugly. It is the physical manifestation of self-hatred and loathing that renders the body dysmorphia of the mind's eye in absurd human form. By representing Elizabeth's complex interiority visually, we see our own. In addition to its characters, the challenges of societal expectations and womanhood are reflected in Elizabeth's environment. Standing in the middle of her loft, she has one of two views: a giant portrait of herself as the icon Elizabeth Sparkle, or a billboard of Sue, the avatar she believed would be a solution to her problems but now haunts her in its uncanny distance from her present self. She's suspended between a past she can no longer access and a societal ideal she can only attain by proxy. In this limbo, she's incapable of finding joy or contentment
It's so
in the
sad.
present because the only paths offered her by society are literally impossible to pursue. Even if she's able to look away from these two massive advertisements, she's confronted by a television playing Sue's show or any other reminder of a youth that has passed her by. The film is an indictment of image making and advertising that sells its audience self-hatred. In the substance, this is particularly potent because Elizabeth is seeing images of herself, but any audience member can relate to the better life promised to them by any number of products or services that only really serve to make their executives more rich. The repetition of workout videos in the film mirrors the repetition of its structure. The advertisements
I like
aren't
that.
selling you the results so much as they are selling you the sex symbol at its center.
Because like what we were talking, like Jess and I had a conversation about this too, about like the fact that it was a workout video. Because we were like, we wondered if they had done workout videos on purpose because like these days there really isn't a like a workout guru like there used to be. So like the Jane Fonda, like Richard Simmons, Jillian Michaels, like there's these workout queens essentially. But most of them are from a bygone era. Like we don't really have a current exercise like person that everyone looks to and whose name everybody knows. Like that doesn't exist anymore. So we kind of thought maybe they did that specifically to keep it in a more timeless sort of era, or that also to like make it less about anybody currently. Because like if it was a pop star or if it was an influencer or something like that, or like an actress who became an influencer with the younger self or whatever, then you could kind of look at who we actually have, like actual celebrities, and kind of find analogies and like, oh, I bet it was talking about this person, or I bet it was talking about this person. So keeping it an exercise, like there's not really anyone that you can kind of point to and be like, oh, I bet they're talking about so and so. It's just supposed to keep it more in like a time bubble. And again, this movie has a lot of surreal moments in it too, that like a lot of the time we were just like, wait, is this even really happening? Or is this sort of a fever dream? Or like, how much of this is real? There's certain parts where it's like, you smashed the mirror in one scene and then the next scene it's perfect again. It's like this person, like, they just know what to do, even though there's no instructions. There's no real instructions about how to, sew yourself back up or whatever. Like there's very little that's concrete. So it does feel like a dream. Like the whole movie feels kind of dreamlike. So that was one thing that we thought.
Results are literally impossible to achieve, but they continue to dangle the carrot because they know no matter how improbable,
That was a cool
the
edit.
desire to attain the impossible airbrushed physique they see on screen is a wishful thinking that exists beyond the rational mind. It's something the consumer desperately wants that not only dehumanizes the instructor, but it preys upon the insecurities of a normal, everyday woman. Perfection is unattainable. It doesn't exist. The best thing you can do is try to age as gracefully as you can. Feel confident in yourself and be comfortable in your own skin, knowing that we're all subject to the same forces of aging and gravity. For Elizabeth, this acceptance is impossible because she's constantly fed unreasonable expectations as a vocational hazard. She will always be the subject of a leering cultural gaze that feigns shock when a movie star who was once 25 is suddenly 50. It
Oh
is
no.
definitionally
Aging?
stupid, and
Time
yet
passes?
it is a reality for women, and exponentially more so for those in a position of public visibility. All right, let's talk about some of the images in the film. The substance is viscerally invasive, like to the highest degree. Sometimes these invasions are comedic, Dennis Quaid's aforementioned pores, Dennis Quaid's wet lips slapping shrimp tails in one of the film's most disturbing close-ups, like, god damn it, it's so gross. Or the moment a globular breast connected to an optic nerve slips out of one of Monstro Alyssa Sue's many holes. Look,
Yeah,
if the substance didn't
that
make
was
you
gross.
barf, my hope is that this video will. That's cinema, baby.
It got us
Can
close.
also be viscerally off-putting and elicit extreme bodily reactions from the audience. For example, Farja reveals in close-ups of injections, like if you have an issue with needles, you're probably gonna fucking vomit at this thing.
Yeah.
Like the amount of injections.
A lot of needles. I'm
in
glad I don't
this
have an issue with
movie.
needles.
Every time Elizabeth and Sue switch, they have to inject themselves with a stabilizer, and it's gross and confrontational from the start, but it becomes increasingly nasty as it goes on. Elizabeth and Sue have bloody, knock down, drag out fights in the loft. Their bodies are dragged across the floor.
Demonetization, demonetization. That's the other reason I'm like, how am I going to put this video on YouTube? I'm just like the reaction, to the movie, because it's like, oh my God, I won't be able to put it's going to be all blurred. Like the thing is going to be so, there's so much I cannot show.
Hurled through glass and pummeled into pulp. Every time the body presents a new lump or abnormality, the film hyper-focuses on these changes, creating extreme discomfort for the viewer. The lengths to which the film goes to inflict this bodily harm onto its characters is relentless, but it has a purpose. And that's why it's resonating with audiences. It represents the real-world barrage of cosmetic bodily harm and the insatiable desire to conform to an unrealistic image. To continue to try to return to one's youth when the body is ultimately unable is akin to self-abuse. One too many chemical peels will burn your face off. But even if you're successful in transforming yourself, what's left? Is Sue Elizabeth, or is she something else?
I think she's
An
something
embodiment
different.
of a
I think she's
hollow
new.
societal construct. When Sue begins to break the rules and spend more time in her body, she has to harvest stabilizing fluid from Elizabeth, which creates an oozing infected wound that the camera lingers on without remorse. This injection site darkens and gushes and represents the evident harm that we often ignore for momentary relief. Even when we're armed with the knowledge of the negative side effects and irreversible damage taking something like the substance could do, many women...
See, look, she looks surprised by that, which is why I was like, after they separate, I don't think they, have each other's full memories. But, it sometimes seems like maybe they have some of them, and sometimes, I don't know, it's confusing. They're supposed to be one person,
Insecure men, as we see in Elizabeth's reunion with the man who first introduced her to the drug, seriously consider taking it for their own vanity, to feel comfortable and desirable in their own skin again. When Elizabeth has the opportunity to cut herself off from the substance and own the small amount of physical deterioration, she can't help but continue until it's too late. What initially began as an attempt to live the best version of herself has created a jealous and vindictive relationship that culminates in violence, but she still can't cut it. It's an addiction, and it's part of what makes Elizabeth such a remarkably sympathetic character in this film. You feel for her. The scene where she's trying to get ready and she looks
that part hurt me
gorgeous,
so
but
bad.
still just not quite happy with how her hair's falling, how her makeup looks, feels she's inadequate to go out in public, to go on this date.
Ugh, it's so
Oh,
sad,
God.
especially considering the guy that she's going to go on a date with is a totally average dude. Also, all of the men except for the hot doctor at the beginning who gives her the substance in the first place, or who tells her about it, but he's on it, right? So all of the men that she interacts with in this movie are average at best. And then they're all treating her, Demi Moore's character, like she's the hag, even before she becomes a hag. It's very real. We were talking about unrealistic or double standards of beauty and stuff earlier. It's when her across the aisle neighbor when she's as Sue doing a big construction project, he like doesn't realize it's Sue. He thinks it's Elizabeth, and he's like banging on the door and screaming, and it's like, "Hey, lady, I'm gonna blah," and he's being super rude. Sue opens the door. He's like, "Oh, wow, actually, you know what? You can do anything you want to. I thought the old woman lived here." It's like, oh my god, she is so much hot. Like Demi Moore is so much hotter than you, dude. And again, I don't know if like if they like uglied up some of the guys at all. I have no idea. I don't know who these people were. I mean, they acted fine. I'm just saying. All of the men in this movie were average. They looked like people. And then you got Demi Moore, who's gorgeous. Anyway, doesn't matter.
The tension.
It's hard to
you feel
explain.
You feel the self-destruction going underneath the surface that Elizabeth simply cannot rid herself of. Now, it's important to state that the film doesn't come down in binary opposition to procedures or cosmetics that people use to help themselves feel more confident in their own skin. No, not at all. I mean, instead, it treats these habits as a sort of fatal capitalist addiction that will kill you if you lack the baseline of self-esteem and self-respect to protect yourself while tending to your image. These supplements will only amplify the pre-existing relationship with the self, which, for most people, is complicated. But I also don't think the film is judgmental of that complicated relationship and fear of aging. If anything, I think it hopes to remind its audience that these are feelings we all wrestle with. In many ways, The Substance is a film about the impossibility of pleasing others or appealing to unrealistic standards. If we find all of our time clamoring to return to an earlier state, we do so at the expense of enjoying the present. It's no surprise that this message is resonating with an audience because this positive reading encourages a viewer to chill out a bit and stop worrying about chasing an impossible ideal.
Yes, exactly.
That movie saw
That's what I said earlier.
A flyer on a risky movie that turned out to be one of the best of the year. What's even cooler is that it's a movie this nasty, this unapologetic, this horrific, and also this funny. This film is fucking hilarious. I mean, in the darkest sense of comedy, but truly, I mean, the lengths that it goes to just keep repeating the same steps and just...
I think this movie had jokes. It was not a comedy, though. There are funny bits. The bit at the end where she goes full Evil Dead the musical, that was fucking hilarious. Like, there are parts of this movie for sure that are very, very funny. But the Oscars and Hollywood or whatever, they just really need to put some love on the horror genre. Like, this should not have been in the same category as freaking Wicked, Like, it just shouldn't have been, and it was. Horror needs its own genre.
The way it drags on and goes to these insane extreme lengths. God, I bless you, Coralie Farja, you just... you get it. So maybe the way to make a hit movie is not to chase an illusory industry mandate of broad audience appeal. Maybe the way to make a hit movie is to acknowledge that maybe we're all a little gross by societal standards. Maybe we're all a little human. Maybe, just maybe, what we learn from The Substance is that honest humanity, that's what audiences really want.
Okay. It was, like I said, this movie messed me up, but in a good way for sure. Like, there's a lot. There's a lot in this movie, and a lot of it's very disturbing. A lot of it's very gross. A lot of it's horrifying. It was, if you're watching this, again, I really hope you saw the movie. There will be like a spoiler card at the front, because there's definitely going to be, this movie is full of spoilers, and I spoiled a lot. It still makes me feel like, every time I like think about it. But yeah, that's where I'm at with this film. It makes you think. And it's been a minute since I've seen a movie that actually like made me think. And that has stuck with me in such a way. Like days later where I'm still just like kind of thinking about all of the things that the movie was trying to say and all of the things it did say. Um like whole scenes just keep playing themselves in my head and I can't escape them. Um but yeah, messed me up. But also again kind of did make me like kind of reset some things in my brain about like how I view myself. Um like and I think that's a good thing. And I think that it has made a lot of people take like a double take essentially and be like, wait a minute, what am I doing to myself here? You know, let me just take a step back and enjoy what I have. And I think that that's a good thing. I'm going to stop rambling now because I I didn't think out what I was going to say as well as FilmSpeak thought out what he was going to say. So there's that. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stuff from here, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification if you want to get notified whenever we post. Check out some of the other things that are happening, and I will see you in the next video.